The Suicide Squad are a group of idiots. Mostly villains who are looking to decrease their prison sentences. They are highly disposable and are sent on missions that are, well, suicide. For both of those reasons, the squad has had many members whose names come and go just as fast as they do. Names like Werner Zittel. Werner was born to a noble house in the tiny nation of Latava with a very real claim to the throne of the country, but his family lost their fortunes and had to flee to Canada. Hell yeah. Here in the Great White North, he became involved with organized crime, using the profits from his illegal activities to finance his return to Vlatava to reclaim his birthright. Though he was hanging around now as a benevolent monarch, he continued to be involved in organized crime using the alias Count Vertigo. Count Vertigo also happened to have a hereditary inner ear defect that affected his balance. So, to counter that, Vertigo had a small electronic device implanted in his right temple that compensated for this problem. Now, tinkering with the device, Vertigo learned that he was able to affect other people's balance as well, distorting their perceptions so that they could literally not tell up from down, an effect known as vertigo, and he used this skill to fight Green Arrow. He joined up with the Suicide Squad in issue number 24, using his powers to make people dizzy to his advantage until the squad disbanded for the first time and he became a prisoner of Poison Ivy. He actually has a decently chunky history, which is why he's leading this list. But now it's time to get your thinking caps on, because next up is the Thinker. While a lot of superheroes and supervillains have origins that deal with some pretty wacky and wild stuff, Clifford DeVoe's origin almost feels too real. Clifford DeVoe was Keystone City's district attorney during the trial of mob boss Hunk Norvalk. DeVoe ended up becoming stumped when the defense put a young woman on the stand, and rather than offend the jury by harshly questioning her, he instead decided to withdraw his case. This pretty much broke the man, and he ended up visiting Norvalk while under the influence one night, offering the crime boss his services as a thinker, preparing alibis and legal precedents to keep his organization out of jail. They worked together for a decade, but eventually two of the crime boss's underlings tried to implicate DeVoe in a crime, and so he literally dressed up as a cop, went to the police station, stole the evidence, and then helped those two underlings make it to the afterlife. Norvalk then started to feel threatened by DeVoe, and when he went to his house to take him out, DeVoe tricked the guy into firing on himself. Then DeVoe took over the operation. It was then that he became a villain of The Flash, Jay Garrick, having the thinking cap created for him that projected his mental force and improved his already incredibly impressive mind. He would join up with the Suicide Squad in Doom Patrol and Suicide Squad Special number 1 in March 1988. Next up is a character I think you probably haven't heard of because she's so new that we don't even know her real name yet. Wink here is a kleptomaniac whose true identity we don't know yet, as I just said. She was abducted by the illegal Post-Human Project, who were essentially turning people into metahumans. Wink, however, was deemed a failure because she actually hid the fact that she gained the power to teleport. Using her powers, she managed to free another new metahuman, who she eventually named Aerie, and eventually, sometime after having a run-in with Amanda Waller, Killer Croc, and KG Beast, the two escaped and joined the Revolutionaries. This brought them into direct conflict with the Suicide Squad in Suicide Squad Volume 6, issue number 1, where they were pretty promptly captured by Locke and the squad and forced to become new members of the team. Next up, the Flash villain known as Big Sur was actually born with the unfortunate name of Doofus P. Ratchet, and an even more unfortunate malformed brain gland. This caused Doofus to grow to incredibly large and muscular proportions, but left him mentally handicapped. So I just want to say, whoever named him Doofus is really just the worst person ever, and I hope they get their comeuppance. The thing about Big Sur is that he isn't really evil at all in any way, but he is pretty susceptible to being manipulated. Because of that, and because of his incredible strength, he was abducted from his mental hospital home by a group of supervillains who equipped him with a high-tech suit of heavy armor created by the Monitor, which included a super powerful flying energy mace that also allowed him to fly, but also made him even more susceptible to telepathic suggestion. Thanks to that, Big Sur had been used as a henchman or minion by all kinds of supervillains throughout his career, including the Rogues, the Injustice Gang, Justice League Antarctica, and then he was used by the Suicide Squad in return for a full pardon in Suicide Squad Volume 2 number 1, where he subsequently got popped, sorry. Next up, we have the original leader of the original Suicide Squad created by Amanda Waller, who can use pyrokinesis to, get this, generate a literal flaming psi scimitar that can open dimensional portals and cut through basically anything. His name is Raza Katua, aka Rustum. Raza first ever appeared in the first ever Suicide Squad comics as a member of a villain group operating out of Iran and the fictional country of Karak. He became an enemy to the United States after his family accidentally passed away during an attack, and this naturally made him an enemy to the Suicide Squad. In original continuity, Rustum and Rick Flag went through the Psi Scimitar's dimensional portal and ended up trapped with dinosaurs and all this junk, and they fought alongside each other but turned on each other in the end, with Rick coming out on top. But in Prime Earth continuity, Rustum was captured by the US government and forced to be the field leader of the first Suicide Squad created by Amanda Waller. After the team failed, Rustum and the rest of the team were imprisoned in a super secret prison hidden from the rest of the world until Maxwell Lord found the team and used them to fight both the Justice League and the current Suicide Squad, with Rustum escaping and vowing revenge on Waller. Of all the characters on this list, I think the character of Velvet may be the most unique. Velvet first appeared in 2023 in Unstoppable Doom Patrol number 2, and while there's no better way to say this, Velvet is a worm, or a worm-like metahuman. So basically, Velvet was a member of Task Force X's espionage unit and was given orders by Peacemaker to infiltrate the Doom Patrol. Velvet has the ability to create human constructs who go on to grow a conscience, which is then used by Task Force X. So, when we see Velvet for the first time, he seemed to be the symbiotic pet of a kid called Worm. Worm is rescued by the Doom Patrol during a fight with a giant robot, which was set up by Peacemaker. He is invited to the Doom Patrol's headquarters, and Worm begins to want to be a part of the Doom Patrol. Peacemaker threatens to use the bomb implant to blow Worm up, but before he does, Worm basically asks the Doom Patrol to take care of his pet, Velvet. Then, Worm gets popped. But the mission is still a success because now Velvet has infiltrated the Doom Patrol proper. I don't know about you, but that's actually kind of genius and really cool. Next up is Eve Eden. Eve Eden was just a girl with a cool name who grew up in Kansas with her mom, dad, and her brother. That is, until her mother Maureen introduced Eve and her brother to the land of the Nightshades, where Maureen had been the queen until she was banished by a villain called Incubus. Maureen received word that Incubus had been wiped out and she took her children to her homeworld, but Incubus's passing was actually just a trap by Incubus himself. They were attacked with Larry, Eden's brother, being captured and Maureen being mortally wounded. Now, because of her origins, Eve had the power to become a living shadow and open portals to any location she could see in her mind, and Maureen pushed her to master these powers to one day rescue her brother, Larry. Eve returned to the land of the Nightshades a bunch of times to try and rescue her brother, but she could not fight Incubus. Inspired by superheroes, Eve decided that she needed experience to fight Incubus, and so she dropped out of college and moved to Washington, DC in order to become a legitimate superhero, approaching King Faraday of the Central Bureau of Investigation and offering her services. After some time with the CBI, Nightshade was later introduced to Amanda Waller, who asked her to become a member of the first ever Task Force X. Nightshade agreed on the condition that she could use the team for one more personal mission, but I'm pretty sure she hated every second that she spent on that team. Now, the earliest appearances we have of the demonic being known as the Nightmare Nurse came in a very innocent seeming way, sort of. Working as a housekeeper named Asa for a woman named Alice Winter in the House of Mystery. Unfortunately, Alice became pretty ill and Asa knew that there was no way to actually cure her. So, what did she do? Well, since Nightmare Nurse was in need of a new host body, since her current body was becoming old and decrepit, she decided that it would be best for her to just possess Alice's body instead. Alice's body now became Asa's as the Nightmare Nurse, the healer from hell. This demon was essentially forced by the gods Apollo and Panacea to take a Hippocratic oath. Nightmare Nurse is essentially a magical healer. She is capable of using her magical abilities to heal a patient suffering from basically any condition, whether it be spiritual, physical, and or psychological in nature. Her first introduction was in Justice League Dark, where she was summoned by Zatanna in order to save the Phantom Stranger's life. She became a member of a Peacemaker-ran splinter team of the Suicide Squad during Suicide Squad Volume 7 Number 6, when the main team got stuck on Earth 3, and this team got wiped out on their first mission in Swamp Thing Number 8. Speaking of characters who just have wild origins, our second to last Suicide Squad member today is Lord Satanas. Lord Satanas was a sorcerer who came from more than 1 million years in the future, when human society had, for some reason, reverted back to a medieval mystical world. His main rival at that time was Ambra, ruler of the earth and possessor of the potent runestone of Merlin. Satanas led a revolution against Ambra and his daughter Serene, who also sought the runestone. Ambra was defeated, but in his dying breath, he sent the runestone to a random time in the past. Satanas and Serene decided to co-rule together, and both found a spell to travel back in time to search for the runestone, and they both traveled to the 20th century, where Lord Satanas became an enemy to Superman. That was back in 1982, and his last appearance was in Crisis on Infinite Earths number 10 back in January of 1986. But his time on the Suicide Squad came as a much more recent surprise in Suicide Squad Volume 5 number 45 in October of 2018 to bolster up the Suicide Squad on a sensitive mission to Atlantis alongside Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Killer Croc, and the other addition, Master Jailer. And last but certainly not least is the guy with the most entertaining name to say that I have ever read, Hunky Punk. Hunky Punk here is a British supervillain who started off as a bored history teacher, Dorian Ashmore. Dorian, like a lot of us, was craving more adventure in his life, so you know what he did? He mounted an archaeological expedition to the ruins of a medieval church, which is totally cool. Now, once he was there, Dorian was awoken by a strange voice that led him to a very peculiar black dog. This dog then went on to explain that he was actually the spirit of an animal that was sacrificed by early Christian settlers, and he was sentenced to guard the church forever. This spirit then offered the position to Dorian, telling him that it came with the benefit of immense powers, so naturally, he took it, becoming the Hunky Punk, facing off against his enemy Mr. Albion and the Victory V's. He would later end up on the Suicide Squad when he infiltrated Belle Reve prison under the guise of England being interested in Task Force X's program. But Amanda Waller saw right through his scheme and forced him to come on a mission alongside herself and Captain Boomerang to rescue the Suicide Squad in Germany. Once there, he and Boomerang saved Harley Quinn from cultists, but then, well, Hunky Punk got a hunky crossbow bolt to the eye courtesy of Rose Tattoo, and now he's gone. And that's a wrap on that. I'm Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'll catch you on the flippy flop, but until then, peace out, nerds.